Today on AE Test Drive, we're taking a look at the plugin Transfusion. Transfusion, which is available on aescripts.com, brings style transfer functionality to After Effects. For those of you not familiar with style transfer, it is simply the process of taking the style and color of one image and applying it to another image. It's still a growing technology, and although it's existed for still images for a while now, Transfusion brings this process to your moving footage in After Effects. I'll be showing you how even the smallest of changes can have a dramatic impact on your rendered results, and we'll try applying it to a variety of material and see what sort of results we end up with. It can be addictive and also a lot of fun seeing what styles you can create by combining images. So let's get started. So I'm going to start off very simple, showing off the Transfusion plugin. We'll just start with a simple background here. It just is a slow push in, just to get us started. So when you go to invoke the plugin under Effect, Style Transfer, you'll notice that there's two plugins. There's Transfusion Blend and Transfusion Styles. We're going to start with Transfusion Styles and then move over to Blend. It will get more complicated as we move through. And then I'll be bouncing back and forth between Blend and Styles. But we'll start with Styles first. And you'll see the interface is pretty simple. There's not a lot of controls to it. The versatility and flexibility comes in the image you're applying the effect to and the source image you're taking the style from. Even the most subtle changes from one or the other can have a dramatic impact on the overall look. So as you see in the interface here, our first box tells us to browse for a particular style. Now you get these styles, and it gives you a handy link here to open the gallery on their website, and you have currently this set of styles available. You can download them individually, or you can download them all with the top one in the top left here. And so download them to any spot on your computer and direct this plugin to that folder wherever you've put it, and you have all these styles available that you can apply to your image. So let's start with spirals. We'll pull this one open, and there you go. It's applied our styles effect to our canvas background and gave us this completely random spirally look. Now you'll notice in the interface that there is a level of details drop down here, and it has 4 different levels of detail. By default it's at level 2, so if we take it at level 4, let's take a look at what that will give us. And one thing you're going to notice is that this is rather processor intensive. It's a CPU based plugin. In speaking with the author, they are working on a GPU based plugin. And so there you go, you can see that we have more fine detail. The spirals get smaller as they're picking up more of the image. You'll also notice that on the edges here we're seeing some sort of bordering going on, and there is a control to eliminate that if that's not what you desire, and I think that is something we most of the time we probably would want to eliminate. So they do have a checkbox here that says remove border, so we just check that, and that will take care of the edges for us. And once again, render times can be a bit long, especially when we get more complex, as we will later on. What I'm going to be doing in the tutorials, I'll be speeding up or editing the rendering of the images I'm showing you, just so you don't have to sit through them. So there you go, the border has been cleaned up. And the last checkbox here is keep original colors. Now if you recall, our original colors are this golden color of our canvas. This color is coming from inside the style itself. So if we were to click this box, we want to keep the color. There it applies the color but keeps the style. And of course lastly, the info palette lets us know which one of the styles has been applied, and it tells us the path and the name of the style here, which is spirals. So when you render that out, it gives us a sort of life to it. Because if you remember, I have a slight scaling up of the canvas background itself, and so this is how the plugin is reacting to those changes, giving us kind of a little bit of life of its own. I've also applied just a bit of a boost in the saturation to help it out. And this was obviously a level 2 in detail. But what if we are working with some MoGraph objects? Let's say we have this animated wireframe cube that we're sitting inside. We could probably do a lot with this with the different styles that we have available to us. Well, let's take a look. Let's apply the same style. Go to Effect, Style Transfer, and Transfusion Styles. Let's apply the spirals to this and see what we end up with. And there you go. Same style, completely different image that we're affecting, and a completely different look. So when we render this, this is the sort of look that we can get. Very quickly you can see that just by applying the plugin just on its own and not doing anything else to your image, you get some very unique looks. Something like this you can be used for any sort of background, VJ work, concert background screens, anything like that. Now there's many different styles you can choose from. I'm not going to bother going through all of them, but you do have, I haven't counted them, but there's maybe 20 or so here. And so using the same wireframe cube, we can get a lot of different looks just right out of the box. This is an example of the cartoon style. And then what I did with this one is I rendered the cartoon style, brought it in, and reapplied the exact same cartoon style to it, so it doubled it up. This plugin really does invite you to play quite a bit. You can spend a lot of time just experimenting with the different styles, rendering them out, bringing them back in, and applying a different style again to it to affect it even further. So going a bit deeper, let's say that we have just put together just a very quick MoGraph cloner animation, very basic, and it doesn't look very interesting on its own here. So what if we were to, let's say, Transfusion Styles, and let's try the cartoon plugin on this one. And there you go. You get a cartoon style for your MoGraph objects. And when we render this out, we can have these sort of looks, just with very basic primitive objects and a cloner. And these are just a few of the different styles that are available. This one's called Bulky Brush. You can see with very little effort we get a very unique, almost a hand-drawn look in this case. So if our motion graphics get a little more complex and we have an animated character, for example, and let's say I want to turn him into a sketch. How's that going to look? So let's go select him, do Transfusion Styles, and let's go to, well, if we do a cartoon on him, and I'm going to keep the original colors. Let's say the client wants the colors of the tie to remain. In this case, the client did want those to remain. Those are the logo colors. And there you see it's not too bad. It's kind of sketchy. And we can increase the level detail and to see what that will get us. And there you see it's smoothed it out even more. Not really the effect I'd be looking for this. So let's change the style. So instead of cartoon, let's say we're going to do sketching. And we're still sitting at level 4. So let's see what this is going to look like. Alright, now we're getting a lot more of a sketched look. So if we drop this down to level 2, it might roughen it up a little bit. Yeah, so you can choose which one you want, what level of sketchiness, if you will, that applies to your character. Now let's say I was happy with that and I render it out and place it on a background. And we can have that kind of look. Just with our 3D character animation. And now he looks pretty close to being hand-drawn. I do have a posterize time effect on this. I find that, and you'll see this in a lot of the examples I'll be showing you, that for me, my personal feeling on this is when something is very, very heavily affected like this, it doesn't look right when it's in real time, when it's in 30 frames a second or 24 frames a second. I find I need to drop down the time because it's trying to mimic more of the old school hand-drawn style, which was not in real time. So we're used to seeing it like this, except character animation, of course, these days with Pixar and all those, they are real time. But this sort of sketch look, hand-drawn look, to me, looks better when we posterize the time. And this is posterized 10 frames a second. And I think a lot of what I'm going to show you is posterized 10 frames a second. So you can throw pretty much anything at it. I've got a spinning Coke bottle here on a rough background. Well, the background is really just a red solid, and I've applied a radial ramp to it and some pixel noise. And I'll show you what the difference is. I'll turn the pixel noise off for now so it's a nice clean background. And this time we're going to apply the second of the two Style Transfer Transfusion plugins, and this one is called Transfusion Blend. Now what Blend will do is it will, instead of bringing in a pre-made style, it will look towards a layer that you put in your comp, and it can be anything you want that you want to take the style from, and it will take that style and it will apply it to this image. Now I've got a lot of different styles that I pulled in. A lot of them were stock that I already had, or some stuff was off the internet. And these are all different styles that we can just throw in and see what sort of look can get applied to our image. A lot of classic paintings, that sort of thing. So this one might be interesting. This is style blocks. So if you bring in the footage into your composition, and you don't need it visible. I'm going to just move this over here. You don't need it visible. You can turn off the visibility. It doesn't matter to the plugin. The plugin will see it regardless. Also, it doesn't matter if the plugin, what size the plugin is. It can be that big, that big. It doesn't matter to the plugin. It will see it at its native size. However, it will matter, and I'll show you later on, what size the actual footage is natively. So whether it's a pre-comp, it does matter. In this case, it's a 250 by 250, which happens to be around the size that the plugin works best with. They say 250 250 or 400 400. Anything beyond that, they say it can be overkill. It can even work at 50 by 50. In my experimentation, I have found that I can still get a lot more benefit out of something that's 750 750. It depends on your image. And we'll see, I'll be showing you different examples of a small, medium, and large and how that affects the footage. But for now, just keep in mind that in this case, this is a pre-comp. The actual footage itself is much larger, and I didn't want to bring in like a 2000 pixel image because it also will take a lot longer to render if it's a much larger image. So we've got that. We sit in the background or turn off its visibility. It doesn't really matter. And if we go to Coke Spin, we have our transfusion blend has been applied, but nothing is happening yet because we haven't told it what layer we want it to take the style from. So in the drop-down list, we'll choose those blocks and it will start to work. And there you go. The blocks have been applied. We can see some of the color coming through. It's not really the sort of effect that we would expect. And that's the thing with the plugin. You really have to play around and see what it's going to give you. I found it's kind of difficult to really anticipate what something is going to look like prior to using it. Oftentimes you're surprised. Now what would happen here if we go into the pre-comp of the Coke Spin and we just turned off the background? Now we go back in, let it re-render, because we've changed the image now. It's going to re-render. Now that's kind of interesting. The background wasn't really helping us here. Now the Coke bottle's got some interest to it. And we can render this out with alpha and bring it back in and place it onto a different background. Let's put that background back on. And let's change the style. So we had chosen the blocks, But I've got a different pre-comp here, and it's a classic painting. I believe this is a group of 7 painting, and I use this one quite a bit in my examples that I'll be showing you. It's got a really nice tonal range to it. It's got very bold colors. It's got nice shading here. It seems to really lend itself well to being applied to a lot of different images. So if I choose my Coke layer and I pull down and I use that image to be applied to the footage, and there you go. Still not quite what you'd expect. The Coke bottle is starting to look interesting. However, the background really isn't. It's the blurriness, the subtlety of the background itself, all of this smooth gradation. The plugin doesn't quite pick up on. There isn't a lot of information for it to pick up on. So what we can do then is on our background, we'll introduce this pixel noise. So just using, you can use any noise filter on here. And now when we go back, it will re-render. Now the image has got something to work with, and we get a very interesting crackled texture look to our background. So when we do a final render of this, we can have this sort of effect. And we can also animate the pixel noise or do a push in of the background itself, and that will make this background come alive. I didn't do that in this sample, but that's certainly something you can play with. Now you could take it even further, and let's say we want to apply I have the label. I have the label here animating, and the label itself is actually on black. So it's going to be applied on black using the overlay mode. So you can see it there. And then I did the same thing again. I repeated it to darken up the bottle so that our final looks like this. Now that's great working with digital images and MoGraph and that sort of thing, but what about working with footage? This starts to become where the original style transfer ideas with still images was coming from, which is you want to apply an art technique to your footage. So I have this footage, stock footage of this mountain. Now this is a 4K piece of footage, which is going to take a lot of time in rendering. Even though this is a 640 by 360 comp, the original source image is a 4K piece of footage. So that is going to slog us down a little bit. So you could choose, if you don't need the 4K, to pre-render this out as a smaller resolution and work with it, and then you won't have as big a render hit. So here I have a 640 by 360 comp. So I pre-comp this in a 640 by 360 comp itself. So we'll work with it this way. So let's go back and apply a transfusion styles to our footage. Once again, we'll browse for, let's try cartoon on this one. It's applying the colors from the cartoon effect at a level 2. And we're going to remove this border to clean up our edges here. And the next thing I want to do, though, is I want to keep the original colors. I like the colors that was in the original piece of footage. So there you go. And you can see level 2, it's not terribly detailed here. Let's increase that to level 4. And we can have this sort of a look. Now you see there are some iterations going on in here, and detail in these areas here. They do say on the website that you can try and apply some blurring to your image, and it will still retain its identification of the line. So let's try that as an example here. So I'm going to take a snapshot of that, and let's apply a slight blur to this. So I've just got a shortcut here to a fast blur. Let's go extreme and take it to a value of 10 on the radius and see what this gives us. So now you see these edges are being affected by the blurriness. It's picking up a wider edge point, if you will, on this. That could be a look that you choose to have anyway. So let's take the blur off and let's add a pixel noise to this instead. I'm just going to add just a straight noise filter to this. Let's make it 20. So we have some noise going on here. Let's see how that will affect our image. So our original, this is our original, and that's with noise applied. You can see in this area here where there was all that misting, it's cleaned it up a little bit. So that's something we could actually play with and see if we can take it even further. Once again, this plugin does really require you to do a lot of experimentation and back and forth. And I've spent a considerable amount of time with a whole bunch of different images and different sources to come up with all different kinds of looks. It really, really can take a lot of experimentation. It's actually a lot of fun. Now going further, another piece of footage. This is just another piece of stock. We just saw an example of using Transfusion styles to footage. Now let's try using Transfusion blend to the footage. So once again, I have this painting, and we're going to ask the plugin to refer to that painting and apply its style to the footage. Very interesting look. It's pulling in the color. It's approximating a bit of the style from that painting into our footage. And we're working at core 1. And you can see the level of detail that we have here. We do have the option of changing the detail. This is treated a little differently. It's referred to as the artificial intelligence core, and it's defaulted to core 1 generic. We can pull this down to core 2 painting detailed. And there you see we have a lot more detail coming back into our image. You have additional functionality here. Beside the style dropdown, we have a source dropdown. And this details source, masks, or effects and masks. So if I was to take my original source, turn it on and isolate it. So it's just over here. Like I said before, it doesn't matter where it is. But if I was just to apply a mask to a portion of the screen, take my soloing off, go back to the plugin, and then tell it to take the reference from the mask of that source, it gives us this sort of effect. Now, what it appears to be doing, if we look at our original here, it appears to, instead of just referencing this small part of the image, it is reading the entire screen. So it's pulling in all this black. And I also tried experimenting with putting an actual background in behind here that the plugin would see, and it didn't make any difference. So it appears it pulls in all the black. Certainly if I blow the image up much larger, and we can try and do that. Let's say we're going to scale up the image quite a bit. You'll see that it doesn't re-render because it doesn't matter. It goes to the original source. The scaling doesn't get interpolated into how the plugin uses it. In addition to the drop-down, there's effects and masks. So if we were to, let's take this mask off for now. I'll just remove that. And you see we're back to where we were. It didn't have to re-render, even though I sized this up, and this is actually very large now. It doesn't matter. Transfusion will see it at its native size. So if I was to now apply, let's say we apply a blur of 10 to our original source image, the painting. So now if we look at it, we can see it's just completely blurred out. And then we change the plugin from masks to effects and masks. And there you see it applies the blurred style of that painting to our footage. Now if I take this drop down back to source, you can see it's ignoring the blur that we have applied to it. Now if we had gone into this pre-comp and blurred it at this level, having it at source would have seen it. So that's using the painting, which is a 250 by 250 comp. What if we use a different painting? Now this one is a 50 by 50. This is the exact same painting, but it's small. So if we select our footage, and in the drop down we choose the painting small, quite a bit different of a look. Almost like a pointillism look here. And the only thing we did was we pulled in a source image of the same painting, but only in a 50 by 50 comp instead of a 250 by 250. So going the other way, I have the same painting large as a 750 by 750. Let's take a picture of that. I'm gonna take a picture of that. And now let's pull in the 750 by 750 version of that painting. And there you go. Once again, totally different look. So here is 250 by 250. Here's 50 by 50. And this is 750 by 750. Exact same painting, different comp size being used as the source of our style. Now footage once again, instead of using Transfusion Blend, we can use Transfusion Style on this. And let's say we use Cartoon on this. Once again, see how it looks on this image. That's great. We'll remove the border. But this time we're going to keep the original colors because we like the colors, how they come through. And in this one, I kind of like the level of detail on this one. So when we render this out, we can have this sort of look. And this is the rendered version of using the Transfusion Blend. So that looks great on stock images and landscapes, that sort of thing. What about working on people? What about Frankenstein? So I've got this piece of footage of Frankenstein in a dramatic moment from a show I did many, many years ago. This looks like it can lend itself to really taking advantage of what the Transfusion plugins can do. So and I'm going to use Transfusion Blend for this one because I want to affect it with a bunch of different kinds of artwork just to see what we're going to get. Now I have a lot of different artwork here, as I showed you earlier. But in looking at this footage, let me close down all the others here. In looking at this footage, it occurred to me that obviously it's in the style of Marvel Comics, that sort of thing. So I looked for source images online that I could probably use and just see how this footage would look applying these styles to it. So let's pull this one in. And you see I'm using just a part of the image itself. Now I'm just going to take off this levels effect I got in here. I'm going to show you the change here. So let's select Frankenstein and let's pull down to that piece of artwork. And there you see we're getting a lot of outlining. We're getting a lot of extra stuff in here as well. But you see how bright it is as well. But because our original image is only grayscale, very little of our original colors are coming through at all. So let's select the Keep Original Colors. And we have some of the color coming through, but I was finding that inside the plugin itself, there appears to be some sort of transfer mode blending going on, almost like an additive effect. So I was finding that I needed to apply a levels effect just to dull this down, and then that got it back under control so more of the color of my original image can come through and not be as washed out. And so there I was starting to get a real Marvel comic look to it, but still with all this background, there's a lot of extra noise going on. So there was a lot of experimentation going on with blurs and noise of original footage and that sort of thing in order to get me to where I was trying to go to. And of course you have just a few controls here. You can change from Core 1 to Core 2 to make it more detailed. You can apply different effects to your original sources. It requires you, once again, it requires you to just do a lot of playing around and trying to come up with the right combination that works for your footage. So in one instance I was able to render this out, which was a good look on its own, but I wanted to pop it out more. And what I found I was able to do in a lot of the cases, after I render it out, bring it back in, I like to transfer it over top of its original footage. So I've got the original footage here underneath, and then I would apply usually like an overlay filter to it, and that really pulls it through and lays it on top of the footage nicely, I found. And then you can boost it up with some more curves controls or saturation, that sort of thing. And by doing so, we can get these sort of looks. Now, as you can see, we have still a lot of chattering going on, and I was able to minimize it a little bit, not entirely, because the nature of the Transfusion plugin is to pick up details, and these are very, very subtle details in the background. It really does pick up on it. And depending on which core I use and which source image that I'm using as a paint effect, it can get better or worse. Once again, they do say on the website that you can experiment with different Gaussian blurs, that sort of thing, to try and minimize this chatter. This one I was fairly successful in being able to get rid of a lot of it. And how I did this one was I was using this at Core 1, and I used this piece of artwork to apply it and then transfer it over itself to get that sort of look. Now, one more sample to show is this piece of footage. Now let's apply, we're going to be working with Transfusion Blend on this because we want to try a lot of different styles to this overall image. So going back to our original painting in the group of 7, let's pull this down and use that as our style source. Now, a very unique look that we've got going on here. This one, for example, is using that piece of art, but what I've done with it is I'm transferring it over top of itself to get this sort of look. I've posterized the time as well. A real nice, almost like a pencil crayon. This one a little more hand-drawn. Once again, obviously the same footage, but this time, and I am using still the same piece of footage on this. I didn't keep the original colors, and instead I brought that one in. I used the luminance channel only of this and overlaid it over top of itself to bring the original colors back in, and then boosted it with with an adjustment layer with a texture applied to it, so that we get this sort of style. And of course the posterized time. And this one is not using the original colors, but still transferring itself back over using the original painting. Once again, using the same painting. We're still using the same painting, but this one is using an overlay transfer mode, and I was using the colors from the original source. So you can see, same piece of footage, by using different transfer controls, different options, choosing between the two different cores also can get us, and bringing more of the original footage back in as well. This one's more of this almost looks like a romance novel cover sort of style to it, and that once again was using the same painting but using the lighten transfer mode over top of itself and adding in a paper texture. Now this is using a different painting to get more of a daubed effect here, almost like paint daubs. More of a watercolor effect here. And this is using yet another painting with a pointillism effect on it. And yet another piece of art, and this was just some squiggled lines that I had made and just a black circle to try and darken up some of these edges and apply it over itself. Using the same piece of art, but bringing in more of the original image. And I did not posterize this one because I wanted to create. This one wasn't as sketchy to me, so I thought it looked okay using it in real time. It's almost like a hyper-real style. Same sort of effect, but applying a paper texture to it. More of a canvasy look. This is using the colors from the art itself. So as you can see, same piece of footage, a lot of different looks depending what art you use. And you see another issue that you may end up with, as we can see here on her cheek, this line that exists. That is the software trying to pick up lines and trying to figure out where to draw. It would be great in version 2.0 of this plugin if we had a threshold control to allow us to dial in just how much of the image that it will take over to try and draw some lines, and we can dial it back or increase it. In this case here, of course, it's looking like a scar on her cheek, and it's just a very subtle, if I go to the original footage on this one, it's just a very, very subtle darkening, shadowing on her cheek here, but the software picks that up and draws it, and so it unfortunately becomes something we would have to paint out in this particular case. And you can see it picks it up on just about all of them there, that she has that line there. So that's Transfusion. I'm sure you can see from this video that the options are limitless and the kind of looks you can create. As I said in the intro, it is addictive. You'll likely find yourself trying newer and newer style images, particularly with the blend plugin, and getting more refined results. I hope you have fun with it. Till next time.